And we're live to review the finale of Season 5 of Homicide: Life on the Street. Over to His Jeffness.
And it is episode 22 of 22, and entitled Strangers and Other Partners, written by Tom Fontana and James Yoshimura, and directed by Kenneth Fink, and originally aired May 16th, 1997. And let's do our usual David B. 226 Morris review from TV.com, written in 2005. And he says, "And so we have arrived at the end of another season of Homicide. This episode would show certain parallels with more high-profile drama season finales. In 1997, The X-Files would end its season with Fox Mulder apparently dead of a shotgun suicide, and NYPD Blue would end with Detective Simone being set up to look like a dirty cop in order to be used as an undercover operative, while Detective Sipowicz would be under suspicion for a murder. However, Strangers and Other Partners wraps up its more dramatic storylines by the end of the episode, after a fashion, and ends with one of the more unassuming cliffhangers that any series used. But let's back up. Homicide, IID, and the Auto Squad have to work together on Felton's murder, trying to simultaneously find his killer and learn if his disguise remained intact. Needless to say, nobody's very happy about this turn of events. Falzone is pissed off at having to work with IID, with the implication that he was part of the problem. Everyone's pissed at the idea of working with Gardy, though with the Homicide Squad the reasons are more personal. They all remember scene of the crime and Gardy's refusal to get out of his car. But the squad has divisions within it too. Pendleton makes it very clear he doesn't want Howard or the newly arrived Russert working different angles on the investigation, citing they're taking the case too personally. What comes as a surprise is that Giardello agrees with Frank and has both of them taken off the case in order to arrange a funeral for Bo. This is out of character behavior for G, looking back to how G let Cressetti look into Chris Thorman's shooting in the first season, and how he let Lewis work Cressetti's suicide while Howard and Felton did his work for him. One cannot escape the feeling that the lieutenant is operating on a double standard. That's exactly what Howard says, but G addresses that anyway. Yes, Megan and Kay have personal reasons for wanting to lock up Felton's killer, but personal issues have rarely biased G before. It is particularly puzzling considering G has had the best relationships with the two women detectives. One wonders if Fontana had plans for the following season. While the show does give both actresses a chance to shine, it doesn't seem keeping in with the realism of Homicide. Simultaneously, it seems that the writers are trying to introduce two new characters to the series. Falzone and Gardy get to do most of the heavy work in this episode. They are the ones who figure out who the leak was, Eddie Dugan, Falzone's informant, and as we find out, the man Gardy used to get Felton undercover. They handle the interrogation in a confrontation that smacks of classic Homicide. We also get some interesting background into both detectives. The biggest insight comes when we learn Gardy, so cowardly in his behavior 1 year earlier, finally found some guts while working another case 6 months later in which he took a terrible beatdown. Despite the fact he finds his stone, several of the detectives will never develop respect for him. We also get a touch of Homicide when the killer is revealed. When the detectives try to make a collar, the killer has skipped town. And there may be some closure for the detectives, but sometimes there is no real justice. While the murder is being worked, two other key storylines from this season are dealt with. Frank finally talks with his wife, who we learn is now 6 months pregnant, and does something that we would honestly not think he could do. He says that he'll give up his job for his family. He has finally chosen between the two passions in his life. Simultaneously, the seeds for his... Okay, I'm going to skip that. If things are improving for Pendleton, they're on a definite downturn for Kellerman. He has begun to hit the booze a lot harder, and now its effects are being felt. He is having blackouts of the nights before, and he is having trouble doing his job, as we see when he loses an eyewitness at a crime scene. Both of the major relationships he has formed are deteriorating. Mildred is becoming openly hostile with him, and Juliana is openly having problems with him. What's more, when he makes an effort to resurface from his haze, Juliana makes it very clear that she has no intention of stopping her wild ways. Unfortunately, things will only get worse for Mike and Juliana. Okay, that's a bit of a mild spoiler, but anyway. It doesn't really tell you much. With all the angst and trauma going on, the cliffhanger of the episode comes after G has a talk with the commissioner about a new administrative policy for the Baltimore PD. From now on, detectives will be rotated through the various divisions every 2 months. Homicide is no longer the elite of the department, and in a matter of months, they may all be gone. This was actually in keeping with real life. In 1994, the new commissioner instituted a 4-year limit on assignment to specialized units. He believed the rotating officers through departments would lead to a greater showing of knowledge and skill. Unfortunately, he did not consider if the detectives would have enough time to develop specialized skills before moving to a different post. This led to a collapse in drug investigations, while many brilliant detectives, including some who appeared in Simon's book, retired rather than leave the squad. The rotation would signal a major change in homicide as well. And I'm going to skip the rest of that because it's a bit of a spoiler, other than say it would be a symbol of the sweeping changes that would take place over the show's final 2 seasons. So in many ways, Strangers and Other Partners is a fitting conclusion to the 5th year of this remarkable series. We, like the squad, prepare for a great change that is coming. As G says in his speech given in honor of Feldman, the bodies still fall, but they will remember who is falling. The detectives aren't perfect, but they work for the best. The show aims high and hits the target most of the time. My score, 8.8. So that's what he says. Ben, what do you say?
I say that topic of rotation is interesting, and we can talk about that later on.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Well, I have taken quite a few grabs at this episode. I thought that after praising Melissa Leo in the previous episode, I don't think she was quite as good in this episode. I think that she just was not as good in my opinion. And I blame the director. Even if it was the same one, I'll blame the director.
It actually wasn't, because the last one was the one, had 2 directors, Leslie Liebman and Larry Williams, and this one was Kenneth Fink, so different director.
Yeah, I mean, what did you think? I mean, do you think that her acting was as good as the previous episode, or was different, or?
I would say that I think her acting was fine, but I think her scenes with Russert were not that great. So I don't really blame her or necessarily the director. I don't know, whoever it was who decided to do those scenes, they really didn't work for me.
Oh, well, maybe it was. No.
And in the past, Russert and Howard had some pretty good scenes together. So this definitely was not. It didn't have the spark that they had between them before. So it just was kind of dull. So I don't really know why that didn't work for me, but it just didn't.
Do you think that maybe she was written as too emotional in this episode, and therefore the actress wasn't able to carry it off because it wasn't real for her?
No, I don't think so, because if anything, in the previous episode, she was almost more emotional, because she was breaking down when she was talking to Frank, but that scene was so much better than
yeah, and she was so much better acted.
But I thought the scenes with her and G were good, and I saw both of their point of view, and I think G was ultimately right. And I don't agree with Morris that it was out of character for him, because if Howard had caught the case as a primary detective, then I don't think he would have taken her off, and that would have been out of character. But that's not what happened. She was the sergeant. He even says, yes, you're a supervising officer, so this is different.
In fact, it was she that went over the mark by overriding Pemberton.
Yeah. So I thought all of that was pretty good and very justified. I just thought they spent too much time on the scenes with her and Russert talking about Bo, and they, in the first part they had the flashbacks, and in this one they didn't even have any. They just talked about them. It was almost like their budget for clips ran out or something, so they just had to talk, and it just wasn't as good. They could have. I think they could have punched it up. They could have either shown some scenes of him wearing different things, or another scene of him talking to one of them. They never, it could have done something like that instead of just kind of having them yammer on about things, and it just wasn't all that interesting.
We've both done a bit of acting, and do you think that in the case of Melissa Lee, and we know the benefit of an actor or actress not being self-conscious, so do you think that there are some thespians that need a good director that they can trust, so that they're not conscious of their own performance, and the trust is placed in the director to make sure that they don't overact?
We talked before about Tom Baker and how, the people that kept him in line, he's so much better than when they kind of let him just go crazy. When he did that, it wasn't as good. It became too silly. So, there's an example of that, where the directors that can both sort of keep the actors in check, but also not be so full of themselves as well as to make it about them. So it's going to be a difficult balance probably sometimes for a director. But
And I think the director that went on to become the producer of Blade 7, Maloney, he was good. It was good. And he had Tom Baker early on, but we won't talk too much about Doctor Who. We're on this.
Yeah. I haven't noticed a lot of patterns when it comes to the directors on Homicide, which to me is another credit to how the show, how high quality it is overall, that there's not a huge deviance, or deviation where I'm like, oh, this director, was. So there might be little things, but in general, and they talk about this a little bit on the DVD stuff, that in television, the producer is the king, is the boss, and in movies it's the director. So it's different. That the producer can basically keep a director in check and say, no, you have to do it this way, and so you don't usually have quite as much kind of things kind of get out of hand with a director just deciding to go rogue on their own and make, but yeah, as far as the interaction with the actors, you can't really know that because I'm not there to see how much, the only window you really have into that is what they say in like documentary features on the DVDs and the actual full documentary they did about the subway episode, where in that one you get a particular, quite a bit about that particular director and how they interacted with the actors. And they mention a few other people. I'm not even sure if they mention them by name, but they mention, the differences in some of the ways directors handle, because they have interviews with all the actors. Andre Braugher talks about, the way he is with directors and stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff in that thing, but it's very kind of limited to about that. So I really don't know how much that plays a part in what goes on in the whole episode. But
one of the things with acting, we may have talked about this before, is there's not just acting, folks. There's two things. It's the choice that the thespian makes. Like, how am I going to act this? And then once they've made that choice, how well do they then pull that off? And of course, the director in certain situations will be making the choices for thee. But then also sometimes maybe the character doesn't ring true in a particular scene.
Yeah, and as far as Melissa Leo in this episode, I think if there's any fault, it was in the dialogue she's given as opposed to her acting choices, because I feel like she's still as convincing as Howard as she ever was. It's just a matter of there's some things, and this is actually discussed, as I mentioned, stuff on the DVDs. There's an interview with David Simon on the same disc as this episode where he talks about working with Melissa Leo, and he said that she was tough to write for because all the actors would question the things that were put in the script for her character. She would say, "I know this character; she wouldn't do that."
You see, that's right. So, that is where her acting might be uneven. In that, if she doesn't believe it, maybe she can't act it as well.
Yeah, and what he said was, it was like, it seemed like at that point that she was very hard to please, because it was like if they changed it to something, then she said, well, Kay Howard wouldn't do this either, and then he's like, he said, he gives himself credit and says, I think I could write for her, but apparently for other people it became more difficult. So anyway, we'll talk more about that actually when we start season 6, because we'll have some other things to talk about. I'll just put it that way.
Right, so we've got a little insight there into her as an actress, where she is someone who has to, just from that I can tell that she has to believe it. If she believes it, then it's much easier for her to act it because she believes it. And so maybe those times where, in my opinion, I consider her acting not to be as good as other areas, it's maybe those times when she, even herself, has not quite believed what she's been reading.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess for me, in my perspective, I would say that she still delivers everything where, I still believe it's Kay saying everything. It doesn't come off as unrealistic to me. It's just, it makes me slightly disappointed in that particular piece of writing. So, but I think, and again, I'll say we'll talk more about this later, but there was some behind-the-scenes stuff going on that kind of made certain things hard to deal with because they weren't sure. This was another year where the cast contracts were up and they weren't sure who all was coming back.
Yes, with renegotiated salaries.
which is why the thing about rotation that was, as Morris said, was a real thing. They decided to use it then because it was convenient for them that basically anybody who they found out later wasn't coming back, they could easily write out as being rotated to a different department. So, but I think the fact that they had that task of they wanted to introduce some new characters, not having to wait till the next season to do it because they wanted to sort of establish a history there. And in Guardy's case, they did it twice because they had him the previous season, and then they had him again here. So you had a little bit of, you were starting to build a history of that character. And they also had to sort of prepare for the possibility of some of the longtime cast members not being there. So they had to write things for them that gave them sort of an out as well in terms of realistic reasons why they would not be back. So that's not easy to do. I don't, fault them for having some difficulty in how they were going to do that, especially with Isabella Hoffman, because she had been non-committal about when she was going to be there and when she wasn't. So she was very tough to write anything that for her that was going to be anything permanent. So they had the scene at the end with her basically saying she didn't know what she was going to do next. So, because that was true. The actress didn't know either.
So what we have here, we're talking of the dialogue between Megan and the ISTP woman, Howard, where she said about the tie for Bo, after talking about him being a gentleman. But even for a gentleman, this is way too Ivy League for him. I don't know how he thinks he could get away with that one when they were talking about the tie. I thought that was a nice bit of...
Yeah, that was a good line. I just thought they spent too much time on that scene, but there were a few good lines in there.
And also, by this, and I don't know whether this is my type preference coming through, but after a certain point, all of the private life stuff starts to get repetitive for me. And it sort of like slows down the plot. Because it's like, oh, it's stuff with Frank and his wife. Yeah, we've been through all that.
Yeah, I didn't mind that part. I actually thought that was a pretty good scene, and you saw a little bit of why they got, work as a couple. There's been scenes before with them where, when they were still together before she left, where it was kind of like, okay, we are established that they've got this marriage, but we don't know a whole lot about kind of what brought them together, and other than a few things that Frank has said. And in this scene, you kind of saw a little bit of a role reversal, because in some of the previous scenes, it was like she was sort of the caretaker of him in some ways, and in this scene, it's like she sort of establishes like, she can be a little feisty as well. And so I liked that aspect.
Now, I don't know if they mentioned it on the commentary. Was there a little bit of an improvisation going on there where, Frank says, talk to, and then she says, don't grab me, I feel grabbed or controlled or something. So that had the little ring of maybe a little bit of nice improvisation there in the moment.
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Because they are married in real life.
They are. So I don't know how much of scenes between them.
I don't know if they still are. They were in 97, though.
Yeah, as far as I know. I've never kept up, with the personal lives of actors that much. It's not my thing. Sometimes I'll hear about some celebrity couple and be like, oh, I thought such and such was married to whoever, and I find out it was like they've been divorced for 10 years or something. So I don't pay attention to that stuff.
And then you go, oh, well, ESFP.
Yeah, well, in some cases, yeah. You hear about some of the ones like, Billy Bob Thornton, like, getting married for a weekend several times or whatever, things like that. But
yeah, then the accountant calls him and says, maybe not.
But yeah.
So the padding, just generally though, but a serious point about type preference, like you're somebody who's interested in this because you got a big interest in soaps. Whereas I can imagine that for some members of some people watching crime dramas, especially the more casual viewers, they'd be like put off by the private life. stuff. And I also felt that it felt like padding.
I think it's actually, there's probably more people that feel the opposite way. But I could be wrong. I mean, because there's a lot of shows that have a lot more of the personal lives featured than Homicide does. And the network was always trying to get them to do more.
It just seemed this episode. It does seem that this episode was filled with a lot of padding. You know, because it was like stretched out to 2 parts.
See, that's funny. I completely disagree. I feel like they had they tried to, like, they could have had so much more happen, and so it was like I kind of had a get on with it feeling to it. You know, so honestly, like, I feel like at the end I was thinking, you know, it didn't feel like a whole episode's length.
Yeah, but so, one moment. Did you just say that you wanted them to get on with it?
Yeah, because...
Well, that's like, padding then. Because it's like, stop giving me this padding, get on with it.
But padding is, okay, I've usually heard that term to mean something like the episode was short and they needed to fill it with other stuff. I didn't feel that way at all. I felt like it was like the opposite of that.
Well, I sort of see it like that, but also I can see it as when there's not enough story, and you have to insert these other things or these other storylines, because there's not enough story left.
And I guess that's the problem, is I felt like there was plenty of story, and instead of telling the story, they focused on stuff that wasn't as interesting. So to me, it wasn't padding. It was just judgment. You know, wrong judgment. Like the focus was off.
Bad composition.
So I still, there were still enough good things in the episode that I liked it.
Oh.
It's just, it was like, I was like, focus on the good stuff instead of the things that just don't really add to it. Like, I liked the scene, I liked the confrontations between, like, you know, the Guardy and Falzone. I even liked the interrogation of the weird guy. I liked, I liked Guardy's talk with Frank and him telling the story of what happened to him and, you know, all that. I thought that was good. And so, you know, all that. And I liked the Kellerman, even though it was uncomfortable, the scenes with Kellerman and Cox and the other guy at the pool hall, it was still a good scene, you know, because I don't know about you, but I wanted her to slap him, you know, so... that was effective in terms of conveying that those emotions going on there.
Yeah, I think that could have been written better. It wasn't bad, the scene with Kellerman and Cox.
But what I love is that so many other shows would have had the character act out of character. They would have had Cox be more sympathetic towards Kellerman and to the other guy, probably, and have her, like, apologize or something to that guy. I love the fact she didn't do that either. She stayed true to, like, how her character is. She basically was like, you're being annoying, go away. But she doesn't say some overdramatic thing like, I never want to see you again. And she doesn't apologize for him to the other guy because she didn't do anything. So I really like the fact that everybody was like, they both were very solid, you know, in their characterization in that thing.
Yeah, was the weird guy the snitch you're talking about?
Yeah.
Him as an actor, he didn't seem to be in the right program.
And Scott Winters is his name. His brother Dean Winters is the one that appeared previously on Homicide. I wish I could remember that character's name, but he was in multiple episodes. The last one we saw him in was Prison Riot.
Yeah, he seems like he should be in, like... He's not. He doesn't come. He comes across as a comedy character in a daytime sitcom.
Well, I didn't have a problem with him as a character. I thought, you know.
Well, just the way it was acted.
Yeah, it's effectively weird, you know, in my opinion. So it worked.
Yes, so what you were saying that yes, the way it was composed, as I think maybe the actual scenes that had to do with the plot mechanics of the story, there was maybe a little bit too much of an info dump, and those scenes could have been a bit longer and more well explained rather than explained very quickly. So there was a little bit of an info dump of plot mechanics in those scenes. Maybe as if the writers thought, oh, the audience isn't interested in the logic of these particular bits. Let's just get it out quick.
What are you talking about specifically?
Well, there was lots of little bits about the logic of like pages and things like this, and the little bits of info dump and plot mechanics, and the actual technical aspects of the plot. And it seemed maybe they were rushed, because you were saying before that maybe they didn't concentrate on the right things.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what I was trying to say, is that those scenes, like, they were effectively paced, and then it was like it would switch, and then the pacing suddenly like dropped. It was like the scenes that weren't about that were weaker because they just seemed like they sort of dragged, and there wasn't the first part was much better paced than this one was. Yeah,
and composition is such a hard thing. You've got to balance these different things, the pacing of it, the tone.
So yeah, even though I don't care what X-Files was doing or any of that stuff that Morris mentioned, I still would say that, yeah, this one does have a little bit of a anticlimactic feel. Although, the scene where they're actually raiding Camo's place, it's just the first time I probably, felt that more, obviously knowing now, watching it now, knowing that they don't get him, and Morgan even made the point, like when Falzone says something about getting on the teletype, he says, putting what on there, though? They don't know what he's driving. How are they supposed to find it? So, yeah.
This is almost an episode that you could show to film students and TV writers to sort of say, when you're given like a class on composition,
you said to say photos, but you haven't shown any of them.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to get too distracted, but I will show them. But it's almost like that weird guy was almost the wrong tone for the program.
Yeah, I thought he was all right. I remember I told Morgan, I thought the opening of this episode, the musical opening, is memorable, but I always forgot what episode it was from. I remembered it as soon as I heard it, but then I didn't remember the context of it.
Right, okay, right, yeah, so we've talked about the composition maybe could have been slower, with more of a focus on the plot and less on the other things. So we've talked about that, and so we can now talk about, well, what was that thing that I was going to talk about before? Oh yes, we'll talk about that later. I'll just write it down on my little board here. The thing about, we'll go through these photos and then we'll talk about the idea of rotation. Maybe my type preference coming through, my ideas of that as a policy, the pros and cons of it. So I showed some of these during the beginning of but I was getting distracted as I was going through. Now, 1990s hair. Kellerman has just woken up after being drunk, and his hair is almost perfect.
He's got quickly recovering hair.
Yeah, and almost perfect hair, and it's like she's got more realistic hair.
Well, if he had Morgan's hair, then obviously it would be quite a bit different, because his hair looks like an explosion. That would be, but he doesn't have that much hair, so it's not really that unrealistic.
I mean, it's just something I noticed in the 1990s. It was even more on Diagnosis Murder with Steve.
You never pass up a chance to diss that show.
Right. This is a good shot of Kellerman's shoulders.
Yeah, he's got little muscles. Oh.
We found out Felton's full name in this. This actor's good. I like this actor.
Well, that's good, because you're going to see more of him.
Right. Oh yes, good acting by Yaphet Kotto at the end. He made some good choices about how emotional to get. There's Kay going a little bit beyond her bounds, arguably. I don't know if I'll make her the thumbnail. Not really. As soon as I saw this guy, I thought, is this guy going to end up being a regular character?
Do you want me to tell you?
Probably will be.
You're probably on the right track there.
Yeah, because I can usually tell by the quality of someone. Oh, this one seems like a better actor or actress. They look like they're regular character material.
Yeah, his character among Homicide fandom, at least the internet groups, was the least favorite of all time. But
it might be the network saying, "Hey, we need a Hispanic character."
Yeah, there was some of that for sure in terms of the composition of the final couple of seasons of the cast. And that's part of the problem with people, is they felt like choices were made based on too much aesthetics than people that were good characters. But anyway, I don't feel that strongly about Falzone. In fact, I think actually the funny thing is that the problem that most fans have with him, to me, is part of what makes Homicide good, is that they don't like him as a character. The fact that he that he sort of gets the upper hand in certain situations, and it's like, as the new guy, like, that shouldn't happen, but then it does happen sometimes. And it reinforces Homicide's main theme, which is sometimes the people that are the quote unquote good guys don't always win, and some slimy, annoying guy is able to get over on you, and that's kind of I think that's done really effectively in some cases. So I don't have a problem with that per se.
Was this the real mayor of Baltimore?
Yes, that was Kurt Schmoke. A couple of great names of these guys: Kurt Schmoke and Harris Glendenning, who was the mayor of Maryland. Governor of Maryland.
Right, so governor on the left,
governor on the left, and mayor on the right. Yeah. So yeah, I thought they were both fairly realistic in their portrayals of themselves. And G shows that he's not really that great a speech maker.
I thought it was an excellent speech.
All right. I didn't.
From the point of view of like showing emotion, from the point of view of the writers writing him in that situation, I thought it was very good. And when he just said that line, he worked Homicide.
Yeah, no, I definitely thought it was in character for G. I was just saying, I didn't think it was that good a speech, but I don't think necessarily G would have been a great speech maker. So it's not out of character at all.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's much more effective, kind of delivering things in a sort of stilted way, which is how he did that. So, it's like it didn't come off as him, trying to force emotion or anything.
Oh, but the way it was acted. It was okay. Let's say a stilted speech acted with a lot of emotion, or acted with a lot of acting quality.
Yeah.
Right. So, what else is there to say? Might use that as the thumbnail, or that one. Don't know, or that woman.
Well, you said you wanted to talk about the rotation concept.
Ah, yes. This is where my preference comes out. The NT preference. Just talking about this. Just this is an idea of. I think in the review, David B216 Morris, is that his name?
So close. B226, Morris.
B226 Morris. David B226 Morris. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, David B22. Mr. Morris. He said that they actually tried that in real life, and so this idea of, and I think we get this a lot from people, where there's a certain school of thought where they want people to do everything, so that they're not it's almost as if they're against people being specialists, and just moving people around, putting them in different departments. I can see what the benefit is, because, like, you know, it's maybe it's good for the individual if they do, like, learn something different and do something else. That can be good. But how about this for a type preference thing, Jeff? Do you think the Guardians will respond less kindly to being rotated than the Artisans?
Oh yeah, they would. There would probably be a ton of grumbling from the Guardians for sure.
That is not the way to do things. They know how to do their job. They do their job very well, and then suddenly they have to do another job that they're not trained for, and they've got to learn a whole new lot of stuff. Have you ever experienced any kind of, like, a situation where you've been put on a rotation? Or would that be not suitable for public consumption? Okay, we won't mention that. Right. Oh, yes. His microphone has just gone off. Somebody may have just come into the office. Right. So yes, the thing about rotation. Yeah, like I said, people become. It's in an ideal world. It would be good for people to be rounded out, but the way the world is, and the way the world is structured in the UK and the United States and Australia and the other Anglosphere countries, is that people become specialists, and there is this intent to produce well-rounded liberal individuals, to be honest, and so you end up getting this thing where people all end up having the same education, one size fits all, and it's not right. And I've talked to Wojtek about this, a German, that the education system is better for people of different temperaments in Germany. So more vocational education for SPs. Or you might have SPs. One of the things where Kersey was slightly behind, just because of his age, was him not realizing that there's a lot of ISTPs in computer programming. Right. So this idea that everyone has to have the same education in order to be a rounded out individual. Rather, so I'm much more in favour of the specialists. So, and then everyone can develop marketable skills. I don't know if there's anything else to say, other than this episode was a little bit of an anticlimax, unless it actually builds up to something. I better give my score out of 10 for this. I'm going to give it about a 7. I think I'll give it about a 7.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
An unexpected visitor.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
missed most of what you said.
Yeah, I gave it a 7, and I was just talking about me being in favour of specialists rather than generalists, and there does seem to be this intent from people in charge to sort of round people out for their own good. And it's
I think what I was going to say was that that we don't have. I mean, they weren't going to rotate G, probably. I don't know. He said none of us, so maybe he thought he could be included in that. But besides him, when you think about the regular characters we had, most of them are not Guardians. So what you were saying about Guardians reacting poorly, I mean, the most prominent Guardian in the squad at this point is Bayless. And with him, like, because of what he'd sort of been going through, you'd almost see like a change of pace might have actually been welcomed by him. Although he did say when he first got into Homicide that was like the pinnacle of police or whatever, so what he always wanted to do. So he might have been somewhat disappointed, but he also, that's the other thing, is Guardians also trust authority more. So he's also probably saying, well, there's probably a good reason for doing it this way. So.
And now, if he was ESTJ, maybe there would be a slight difference there because they're a little bit more individualistic within the Guardians. In that, I think Dario said that for an ESTJ to respect something, it has to make sense, and they have to respect the person who's telling them it as well.
Yeah, well, ESTJs, like, they're constantly looking for, wanting to be supervisors in some way to move up, though. So
yeah, move up the system.
Like, he probably, if Bayless was an ESTJ, he would have taken the sergeant's exam by now. He probably would be fine with the rotation just as a way to give himself a promotion of some sort. Try to work that angle of it.
Yeah, and in fact, that the STJs are in very good memories. They're good for.
Yeah.
And the reason why they have good memories, folks, is they like repetition and routine. And repetition and routine is one of the key ways to memorize things.
But yeah, I did think that after last year's really intense cliffhanger with Frank Stroke, this definitely did not rise to that level in terms of, at the end, you're just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, and also it comes out of nowhere. It doesn't naturally come out of the course of events. It's like just tacked on.
Well, yeah, they did say that that Harris wanted to see him in his office, but that sort of gives you the feeling like, oh, is he going to be moved somewhere else, or is he going to be fired, or is there going to be some big thing with that? And no, it's just, oh, there's this policy, and something's going to happen down the line. It's not really much to leave the viewers with for over the summer. Thankfully, with us, we don't have to wait that long because you're going to see the next episode next week. So, so you don't have to worry about that. But and it definitely gets next year kicks off with a bit of a bang. So it's definitely ramps up from this kind of anticlimactic finish for season 5. So.
You might know about this, Jeff, because you've read the book by David Simon. What was your thoughts on what happened in real life with the real life rotation?
Well, see, that book came out before that happened, so it doesn't cover that. Although I know in future editions of the book he did add certain things, sort of follow-ups but I think it was mainly just about those particular people. So he may have mentioned some of the ones that retired when that occurred, but he didn't go into details as far as I know about that.
Do you think usually maybe it might be a symptom of something else, that maybe they rotate them in order to, like, as a way to try and cut down on corruption? Like people becoming embedded?
I don't know what all justification was made for that, but I know that they stopped it eventually and went back to having the specialized units again. And after getting rid of the board, they brought the board back too. So so there were some things that they decided that maybe the old way was was actually better.
Yeah, I think what you get is like you probably get something like that if you get an ENTP in charge or something. They'll come up with an idea like that because it might be good for them. I think, hey, let's give people new experiences because I can see the benefits of it for someone like me, an ENTP, like the idea that if you give these people lots of different kinds of skills and lots of different kinds of experience, then that will help them as detectives. Right? But not everyone wants to be a Renaissance man or woman.
Yeah, I mean, I could see certain things would maybe make sense, you know, and they would occasionally have like task forces made up of things, and you know the way they use Stivers, you know, who's been a narcotics cop to help with a homicide investigation involving a narcotics dealer, like those kind of things make sense. But just being like, okay, you know, you've been a homicide detective for 10 years, and now we're going to transfer you to, you know, like Falzone Spot, the auto theft thing. Like, now we have you do this. I mean, that's kind of a disruption for no real good reason.
Except to work him into the series.
Well, yeah, but I mean the other direction. I mean, moving a homicide cop to the auto theft.
Yeah,
you know, that's the kind of thing. Like, I mean, you could. I mean,
that's like a demotion.
You talked earlier about sitcoms. Like, there's your spin-off for Munch right there. A sitcom where Munch is an auto theft cop. You know, like he tries to get in with the buddy with the auto thieves by talking about his philosophies and you know that's a whole sitcom waiting to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like the thought process with that. I mean, like it's an age-old discussion between the person who's well-rounded Renaissance man, and the specialist would say to that person, "You're a jack of all trades and master of none."
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts towards that, Jeff, about being a specialist versus?
Yeah, I would definitely like. I have no problem with, you know, if it's a person that's just how they are. They're good at dabbling in a lot of stuff, can do a lot of different things, but not necessarily great at anything. You can find a place for that person in lots of different organizations. But I think probably there's more people that are better at sticking to one kind of thing than others. And I think that plays out when you examine the statistics when it comes to like Myers-Briggs types, because you know, from the research that their foundation has done, you know, there's a whole lot more, a higher percentage of like male ISTJs and female ISFJs. Those are like the two most common types for males and females. And it sort of makes sense that would be the case, because in society you need more people that sort of take care of the day-to-day, everyday stuff that needs to be done. That's sort of the drudgery of life and society. And so you have a lot of ISTJs that it's like they're pretty much, their job is, you know, they go to work, they work their 9 to 5, they, you know, they complain about their job, but they still show up and do it every day, you know, and most of those people are not constantly changing job to job unless they get laid off or something like that. But, you know, they're steady people. And by having that, you sort of, it makes society as a whole steadier, because people kind of stay in the same situation and keep things going, as opposed to jumping all over the place and causing chaos. So it makes sense sort of as a business owner that you would say, you know, I need somebody who's good at X, you know, so I put this person in that, and they don't have to do a bunch of other stuff. Now, when it comes to like restaurant work, because I obviously have a lot of experience with this, most restaurants do operate on that same principle. Like they find people, you know, that are good at being cooks, so they keep them as cooks. They find people that are good at washing dishes, they keep them as washing dishes. Yeah. Somebody's good at serving the public. Not everybody operates under that, though, because sometimes if the staff is small enough, you can't do that. You have to have somebody who's more of a jack of all trades, can do these kind of things. And at the company I work for, that's the case. In the actual restaurant locations, you have times where there's only one person working, and they have to prep food, prepare food, serve the customers, answer the phone, bake bread, you know, all these different things, all within the duties of that one person.
Now, that type of role in England is called an all-rounder.
but it limits your pool of employees because you have people that you could hire to do the behind the scenes type stuff that could be really good at that, but are not good at dealing with people. And you can't really hire that person to be work by themselves because they have to deal with people.
Yeah, it's like, or something else. Is because you're asking someone to tick more boxes. It's like it's like finding someone who is charismatic enough to be elected president, but then also would make a good president.
Yeah.
You need all these different skills. And so, I mean, if we were to be like super hardcore about it, it's like somebody who has to write all of their own speeches, has to come up with all of their own policy positions and do everything themselves.
Yeah.
Then that sort of person would be, you know, probably wouldn't want to run for president because they'd be.
Okay, so I think the only thing left maybe about this episode, just first impressions, because we've got a couple of characters that we've established are not just in this episode, with Falzone and Guardy. Any first impressions on their temperament or type from what you've seen of them so far?
Well, I like Garrity as Guardy, and I feel I'm sympathetic towards Garrity. Well, with both of them, I'm thinking a sensing type.
Okay.
With Garrity, well, given that Audacity is one of the 3 A's, that if Ted Cruz were here, would remind us about the 3 A's of the artisans. I would say that Garrett is some sort of guardian. I'm not really got enough data to go on. The other guy seems like an SP, but then that might just be his upbringing.
Yeah, I've got the advantage, obviously, to have seen them in more episodes. But I will say that I don't think I could spoil too much to say that Morgan's comment when he saw Falzone again in this episode or in the previous one was to call him wannabe Felton. So that's definitely the impression he had of him, was that he's another ISTP character. And but yeah, obviously we'll talk more about that because we'll have more of those characters to talk about. But yeah, I think it's actually interesting because I think my opinion is both of those characters, we've had the type on the show before, but they're sort of a different version of that type. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a good thing for us to discuss when we get into season 6 some of the differences in that in those capacities. But anyway, anything else you had to say about strangers and other partners?
No, it's just that for you to remember to put on your list that I give this one a 7. And I don't know what you give it.
I already did, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you gave it a 7. I give it an 8, so that average of 7.5. And yeah, that's season 5. Next video we're going to do, everybody, is a review of season 5. So stay tuned for that. And the actual next episode, the beginning of season 6, is called Blood Ties, and I'll repeat that again at the end of the next video so that Ben can choose either one to look back and get the episode title from it. So Blood Ties is the name of it, and features a guest starring appearance by James Earl Jones.
Oh, Darth Vader himself.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll have plenty to talk about in the next one as well. But thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.